Hey, Larry.
Hey, Rob.
So we've been lawyering a long time now and representing many dozens, many hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And one of the things that always sticks out of my mind is the people who've had brain injury. What has been your experience in that regard?
It's a long haul for people that have injured had a traumatic brain injury. And what we do is we really concentrate on getting them back to some kind of stability.
It's a weird role that we play because we're not just doing their case.
Yeah.
But we're trying to help them recover and guide them, make sure they have what they need, and it's
get them the best professional help we can. Really, and that includes for somebody like a brain injury where one in particular I'm thinking of where he had a subdural hematoma, which is like a brain bleed. He had lost a lot of his ability to communicate. And so what we did is we set him up with a clinic that has speech therapy and cognitive rehab for memory, and because his speech was slurred and slow.
Arlo, right?
Arlo.
Yeah. And poor Arlo was on a bicycle. He was a professional bicyclist.
Yeah.
And some company had said, hey, demo our fork.
Hey.
Right?
The frame itself.
Yeah, demo the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the fork he's riding along the street and the fork just splits off.
And the irony
goes boom and hits his head.
And this was like a demo bike, and he had already been up and down the hills because he was a professional mountain bike rider.
Yeah.
And so he's just on the flats coming back home, and the fork just broke, and he just went forward, and he hit his head. And Arlo was a chef
in Monterey or someplace like that, at Pebble Beach or something. And then I remember he would talk to you, and it was like talking to someone in slow motion.
Yeah, slow, deliberate, hard for him to process things.
It was a clinic. We found him a clinic that...
Yeah, I was in Bakersfield, and they worked with him. And then for a while, this was some years ago, and for a while I would call Arlo on his birthday. And you could see the progression of how he was improving. And nowadays, you wouldn't even know that he had the injury. Maybe a little bit if you knew Arlo beforehand. Such a nice story, though. He was such a good guy.
These cases, it's often a battle of, okay, where's the money?
Yeah.
Okay, you got liability. That was for a product liability case, that was pretty clear liability.
Yeah.
Now you got, this terrible outcome. So you got those two things, and that makes a case.
Yeah.
Now you got to find the money.
And on that one in particular, Rob, it was a Taiwanese company. So we had to really find the money. And actually, we filed a lawsuit. We had to serve them. So we had to go the extra mile. We had one expert look at the frame or the forks that broke. And he said, you have no case, basically. And then we had it analyzed by another company. And we actually bought an exemplar, another fork, the same thing. And we had schematics, and we compared, and the fork that broke was missing a part. And that changed the case from 0 to 7 figures.
There's been so many others, I can't remember them all. But of course, the one that is really close to our hearts, who had a similar situation as Arlo in that in the beginning he was very disabled and very frustrated. A lot of these people with so-called mild brain injuries, although I'm not sure his would be categorized as mild because he also had bleeding on the brain, didn't he?
Right, and so it was more like moderate or even getting borderline severe because he was in ICU for I think 4 or 5 days. It was touch and go for this poor guy. He fell down a shaft and hit his head. Fell down like 15 feet right on his head.
Was a fence, and the fence collapses. Down he goes into this concrete shaft, tumbles like this and hits the back of his head. And he is out. And then his friends and his brother were there, and they're freaking out. They all running down there to peel him off the ground and get him out of there. And he was out until the paramedics came, and the paramedics got lost.
Right.
And didn't arrive till like 15, 20 minutes later.
It was late at night. It was New Year's Eve.
The longer you're out, the worse that concussion is usually.
And to see his progression, from being very slow in his thinking, at times, like, remember he put some chicken in the oven and burned it, and things like that. It just was very slow, and he did have that same kind of rehab that we talked about, where he had cognitive rehab and memory and speech therapy.
He fought so hard to get well. That's the terrible frustration or irony of these brain injured patients, is that most of the time they understand. I know how I used to be, and this is not me. I'm not thinking the way I normally think. I can't put two and two together the way I used to. I'm this fast. So they understand that, and it's so frustrating. It makes them so furious.
Yeah, he was very depressed, yet he overcame it. He his dream was to go into the military, and that was out after this brain injury. So he went to junior college, got his degree, and now he's going for his bachelor's degree, and he works helping troubled teens. And so he's a counselor. Yeah, through the county, yeah. And so he is my hero.
He is.
Yes.
And he ends up meeting a beautiful girl. They get married. Now they have a kid.
Yeah. I went to the wedding,
and
they have a 7-week-old daughter.
I feel so proud to have been part of that recovery process for him. And, preparing for trial, going to trial. I think we resolved the case
during trial.
During trial.
Yeah. You and I did it together.
It was tough because of all the claims that he shouldn't have been leaning on the fence the way.
Not an easy case. There's one little anecdote where they took his deposition like 3 times because at times he just couldn't take the length and all the questionings. He was getting confused. So the last one, we take a break and we find out that there's a fire near his house. So we stopped the deposition. So it went from client, attorney to evacuees, and he and I helped his family evacuate. So, and it was just like a natural thing, to help him out, because I felt so close to him. And we do this with a lot of clients too. We have dinner with them. We go to the family and see, go to their house.
I'll see that kind of stuff. If you don't do that stuff, you don't get to know your client. If you don't get to know your client, you don't get to know their story. And if you don't know their story, how in the world are you going to impart that and make it real for a group of 12 strangers,
right,
who have never met this person, who don't know them, who have this very small window of time to get to know their story and what happened and how that impacted them.
Yeah, it's like you have days in which to tell the story and embrace that person's identity. And it's not easy because we're talking about years, where the person's injured, and by the time you get to trial, it could be 2-3 years
or more.
Yeah, and to kind of summarize and encapsulate that whole story into like 3 or 4 days, it's challenging,
very challenging. And so you got to know it. You got to know them from the heart and be able to say, okay, what's the core story really that I got to tell here? What is this group of people? What do they have to know about this wonderful individual and how wonderful they really are? Because I only have this much time and this much space to do it. But he's definitely one of my favorites because he's such a success story.
Yeah.
Just the epitome of a guy who was really down, who was very severely injured, and who fought like the devil to get back to normal. Normalcy for people who've had a catastrophic injury like that, it's so elusive, and we all take it for granted.
Yeah, it's so frustrating too. I remember Ray just trying to read his book in college. That was part of his development process.
Yeah.
And preparation is the key, Rob. And I know firsthand that you start early and you'll practice your trial techniques on us multiple times, but that's okay with me. Yeah.
I've even done my opening and or closing argument within weeks of getting the case.
Yeah.
Just to kind of, okay, how is this going to play? How is what are the parts of this story that we really are going to have to tell, or we're really going to have to find out? Where's the gaps? I want to know those gaps early.
Yeah.
So that when I send out discovery to the other side or take some depositions, I know what information is missing. I know what information I want to get and fill in those.
Yeah, and we have to know our danger points from day one and how to overcome them, because the other side, it's contentious, it's adversarial. They're going to be looking at anything they can, and that includes surveillance. And we used to tell Ray in particular, Ray, they might have you under surveillance. So if you say you can't do something or it's difficult for you to do, yet you're doing it, they're going to capture that on tape. And that's another problem too with social media and posting things. That's a whole nother subject.
Getting back to that surveillance thing for a moment. Here you are, let's say, okay, you're brain injured, or you have some other very serious injury. You're trying to recuperate, you're waiting for your day in court, your money is running out, and now on top of all that, you got to worry about, they're watching me, they're following me around like I'm some kind of criminal. And I can't even, maybe, are they peering through my window? Do I have to draw the shades?
Yeah.
One client recently who was very upset over that kind of thing, they found it, but what are you going to do? It's legal for the most part, depending on, how far they take it. So you're stuck with that. And people don't understand how stressful, how brutal being in litigation can really be.
Yeah.